There's a great scene in Tony Kushner's incredible play, Angels in America, where one of the characters attends his grandmother's funeral and looks to speak to the officiating rabbi after the kavira, after the internment. And the rabbi is sitting there with two other Orthodox men, and they're chatting and they're speaking together in Yiddish. And the main character, Louis, approaches the rabbi and talks about the relationship he had had with his grandmother. But then he uses this conversation, this brief introduction, as an opportunity to transition to asking a question about the guilt he is feeling regarding his desire to leave his partner, who is at the time of the conversation dying quickly and painfully from AIDS. And the rabbi listens, nodding his head. And after this last bit of confession, Louis asks the rabbi what he can do. And the rabbi just sits there and looks at him for a brief moment and says, "What do you mean?" And Louis responds, maybe there's a prayer he can say, or maybe the rabbi himself can offer him some kind of forgiveness or atonement. And the rabbi looks at him with a quizzical look and then quickly responds, "Better you were born a Catholic, Babula. Catholics believe in forgiveness, Jews believe in guilt." And it's a powerful line from a powerful play. And though there is some levity attached to it, especially in the delivery of the actor or the actress who's playing the rabbi, is exceptionally good. And just as a quick aside, in the film version of Angels in America, the rabbi, this ultra-Orthodox rabbi, is played by Meryl Streep, to show you just how good Meryl Streep is. And because it's such a powerful line, it of course makes us think. Because the rabbi's not wrong. We Jews are not great with forgiveness. We feel much more at home in the complicated mire of guilt. We are more familiar with carrying with us shame and regret, what ifs, and how comes. And part of that no doubt comes from the fact that we are a legal tradition. So now in 2019 we have Jews who cover the gamut of religious observance from ultra-Orthodoxy here to secular and cultural on this side. Our makeup remains one that is formed from thousands of years of legal analysis, an aspect of which is expressed in the laws of tshuva, the concept of repentance, where the rabbis of the Talmud and modern rabbis as well interpret that the halacha, that the legal requirements of making atonement, mandate someone to ask for forgiveness from someone that they have wronged 3 times with a sincere and honest heart. And what that means is you can't fake it. You can't give a half-hearted apology. You have to mean it. And if you do so with a full heart, you're obligated to do so 3 times. And if the individual is forgiven the first time, there's no need to continue. But if the other individual is unable to forgive, then the person who wronged the other is only responsible for 3 attempts, period, total. After that, our tradition says, there's nothing more that they can do. That's the halacha. That is the legal framework, and that legal framework tells us how to ask for forgiveness and how to make sure that we are covered so that we are not punished for our wrongdoings if we've atoned for them. But there is a big omission here. Because while it's hard to admit when we're wrong, and it's hard to ask for forgiveness, it can be even harder to do the forgiving. And though the halacha doesn't command us to forgive, it does command us to not bear a grudge or to take revenge. And even more poignantly, it forbids us from harboring hate in our heart towards someone else. But the ambiguity of those mitzvot have in some ways let us off the hook, because they're near impossible to quantify. What percentage of our feelings are rightful anger in a sense of injustice? Who gets to draw the line between anger and hatred? How do we know when we are doing something looking for revenge, as opposed to just not being as friendly as we are with people who are kinder to us? We know how to ask for forgiveness. But when it comes to forgiving, we often choose instead guilt, resentment, or anger. But we don't have to. We don't have to let those negative emotions dominate our relationships and beat up on our hearts. And we don't have to be stereotyped as a people by our guilt and our anxiety, our complicated relationships, and our interpersonal insecurities. And furthermore, I don't believe that any of these are actually part of Jewish culture or tradition. In fact, in our Parashat this morning, we see a completely different dynamic at play. When Korach and his 250 followers rebel against Moshe and Aaron, they do so with hubris, with anger. They rise up against the communal and theological structure in place, which isn't a bad thing in and of itself. So let me be clear there. The punishment here isn't taking place because Korach is positioning himself against Moshe. We know in Judaism that standing up for what we believe is right and being able to have that conversation is a beautiful thing, something that should be rewarded. But they do so with so much malice, with bravado, that it actually leads to an existential crisis for the entire people of Israel. Here, one man and this ragtag group of followers nearly caused the end of the Jewish people as we know them. And we might think that God has the ultimate punishment for them, that they shall not only suffer and be killed, but that their names should be blotted out from the Torah and from history in general, that no one should ever know the names and intentions of these wicked men. But that's not what happens. Yes, they are swallowed up, and some are consumed by fire, but God doesn't erase them from history. And according to the Midrash, the rabbinic gloss on the Torah text, it doesn't even cross God's mind. According to the Midrash, God first expresses sadness that the punishment had to be enacted in the first place. And then secondly, names the Parashat after Korach. Our Parashat is Parashat Korach. It's a pretty drastic difference than blotting someone's name off the face of the earth. And if that weren't enough, God then commands Moshe and Aaron to grab the incense holders of the 250 men who were killed, to pound them into metal plates, and then to use them to cover the altar within the Mishkan. Does God blot out the name of the rebels? No. Lahatia, quite the opposite. God uses their missteps to build something holy, and uses the name of the instigator to create a lesson of derech eretz, of how to stand up, how to argue, and even how to rebel with respect and with menschlichkeit, with being kind and with being respectful. And that message is telling, because God doesn't have to forgive. Moshe and Aaron do not have to forgive. But what good does it do this people who have suffered, who have been oppressed, who have been enslaved by cruel and unjust hands, to have their bonds and their tethers transferred to an emotional type of slavery? What the Torah seems to be telling us, and what the rabbis add in the Midrash and the Talmud, is that not only is it a good thing to learn and practice forgiveness, but not doing so, while not in itself a chet or a sin, can destroy us from the inside and lead us to a life filled with anger, with frustration, and with hate. And that consuming fire, that is what can lead us to different sins altogether. We are a people of the law. We have spent thousands of years analyzing legal theory so that we may learn to walk with God. But sometimes walking with God picks up somewhere where the halakha doesn't quite reach. Sometimes we have to learn to go beyond the law in order to heal, in order to be the vessels of Torah that we need to be to make this world better, to make it kinder, and to make it holier. So why not be better to be born Jewish instead of Catholic? Why not allow ourselves to believe in the medicinal powers of forgiveness so that we can free up the space that's in our hearts so often occupied by guilt, by hate, by anxiety, and invite in instead patience, empathy, understanding. It is Shabbat. And on Shabbat, we rest. But when the twisted candle is lit tonight, when we pass around the spices and drink the wine, we all have work to do. Some of us need to do tshuva. We need to apologize for actions we've done, for things we've said, for times we've let people down. But we also need to work on the other side of that complexly intimidating concept by letting some of our hate drift away, by doing the difficult work of letting go, and by doing what can feel like the unthinkable and forgiving. I mean, really forgiving. So that from the ashes of mistakes and missteps, we can begin to build altars of something better, something kind, and something befitting our beautiful peoplehood and tradition. Not because we have to, but because it's right, because it's healing, and because it's good for us. Shabbat Shalom.